what we're doing when we come into samadhi is preparing the mind for insight, for investigation, for contemplation, for vipassana. And so, not to get too comfy staying in samadhi for too long, we come into these conditions so that we can contemplate and investigate and understand the nature of reality. This is what we're doing in vipassana. But we do need to come into samadhi first. These are the conditions for us to have the mind in a very clear and bright state in order to investigate and contemplate. We don't want to be coming in with our everyday mind that's filled with hindrances, right? With the greed and desire and anger and ill will and fear and restlessness and doubt and sloth and torpor, right? The fourth hindrance. When we're coming in to investigate, for contemplation, we want to bring in a very clear mind. We want to come in with a very spacious mind, a mind free of the hindrances. And it's coming into samadhi that is bringing us into that state that we can then go into the investigation. So given for our time for the 25-minute meditation today, I thought we'll just stay in samadhi, because for many of you, you may not have experienced samadhi much in your practice. You might have maybe experienced it sometimes, but not for very long periods of time. And you might not also understand what were the conditions that brought you into samadhi. And as we talked about yesterday on our Dharma talk on Sunday Sangha, it's the focusing on the energy of the breath, that the energy that's moving our breath, that carries us into samadhi. And so you may have gotten to samadhi before, not knowing that, just focusing on the physical aspects of your breath. But it takes a lot longer. It takes a lot longer. And yet when we bring in our attention into the non-physical aspects of our breath, into the energy, it's not as difficult to hold our attention because it feels so good, right? That energy just feels so nice. It's so pleasant. The hindrances just naturally fall away. We're not as tempted to, you might see the occasional thought floating by, but there's just no temptation to engage in it. You feel so good resting in this energy. Like, why would I want to engage in that? So it really sets the conditions for us to then be able to investigate and have contemplate for insight meditation, for vipassana meditation. But we have to come into that state of samadhi first. Otherwise, if we're jumping into vipassana with the mind filled with hindrances, you're not going to have that deep of insights. I'm not saying that you won't benefit from it. Of course, there's some benefit there. There's always going to be some benefit. But it's going to take a lot longer. And it's going to be a lot harder. And this isn't meant to be incredibly difficult. Our meditation practice is actually quite pleasant. When we know what we're doing, when we know how to bring ourselves into these blissful, joyful states, and then most times, again, it's okay to stay in samadhi sometimes, but then really, for the most part of our practice, we really should be taking these good conditions instead of just blissing out on them, using them to contemplate and investigate the nature of reality, to see what's really going on, in the world. Because we don't see the world clearly. We don't see it. We see it through the lens of our hindrances. We see it through the lens of our current mood, whether we're tired, whether we're not tired, whether our energy's high, whether it's low. We see the world through our past memories and experiences, our views, our opinions, our beliefs, right? All our perceptions, right? Which are always changing. And so we're not seeing reality. And it's why we grasp at things. It's why we grasp at the things that we think are going to bring us happiness, and we push back on the things that we think are going to infringe on our happiness, not realizing how reality really is coming into being, how we are coming into being in each moment, based on millions and trillions of different causes and conditions arising, right? Arising and passing away, arising and passing away. You are arising in each moment. You are different in this moment than you were a few moments ago, right? New conditions, new words that you might have heard that change you in some way, some biological things that are changing you, some things in your environment changing. So to see, this is what we're trying to see, that everything appears to our ordinary mind, to the ego mind, let's say, or not even the ego mind, but I mean definitely to the ego mind, but also just an ignorant mind, a mind that has not seen through the illusion. Everything appears so solid, so independent, so inherently real. And this is the problem. This is how we take the world to be. We don't see how it's all arising. We don't see how we're arising. We get mad at someone for doing something, for saying something, and we take it so personally, as though there was someone solid and independent in here to take it personally, right? As though there was someone so solid and independent that we could be angry with. They're arising based on their causes and conditions. We're arising based on our causes and conditions, right? Everyone is simply arising, an activity, a verb, not a thing. Not a thing. And when we see this, right, the three characteristics of existence in Buddhism, everything is impermanent, including you. There is no inherent self. There is no independent, solid, inherent self. You exist, but not the way you take yourself to exist. And that because everything is changing and there is no inherent self, if we misapprehend that, then the result is dissatisfaction. But when we understand that everything is impermanent and arising based on causes and conditions, things that are happening and things that aren't happening, that are causing each moment to arise, trillions, quadrillions of things that are happening, so numerous, probably a number too big to even know, of how many things that are happening and aren't happening, for each moment to arise, right? Seeing there's nothing here that's directing all this. It's all just being influenced, causes and conditions. This is what we're trying to see, the nature of reality. So that so there is no temptation to grasp at anything anymore, right? Why let go? There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to hold on to. And there is nothing here that could hold on to it. Nothing fixed and permanent here that could grasp at anything either. And we're more peaceful. And this is why when we let go based on wisdom, which is why in the meditation, why our meditation practice is so important, and that we get the instructions right, what we talked about yesterday in class. Right? If we're missing that instruction of how to come into samadhi, focusing on the energy that moves our breath, if we're missing that instruction and not coming into samadhi, and then, so not having the conditions to be able to investigate, to be able to contemplate the nature of reality, we will not see this, and we'll still hold on. We'll still be attached to things because we don't have the understanding. We don't know. We know when we're here in our Dharma talks, we hear the teachings, you read the books, you go, oh yeah, I get how it all is. But someone did something, someone insults you, or someone did something unkind towards you, and we immediately think there is something there to hold on to. We think that what they did was so personal. But if we could really see all the causes and conditions that led them up to that moment, we would think, oh, there was no personal choice made there to do what was done. It was all the causes and conditions that led to that moment. Millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions of things that did happen and didn't happen. But we have to see this in our meditation. This is where the insights come from. When we see it in our meditation, so that when it happens outside, and you've really seen it and you really know it, there's nothing to let go of in that moment because you didn't grasp at it. You didn't cling. There was a recognizing there's nothing to cling to. This moment is arising based on millions and billions of trillions of things. And it's changing moment by moment by moment. Why am I going to try and hold on to that moment back then? It's not happening. It's not happening now, and none of it was personal. None of it was personal. So we do need to make sure we have the right conditions in our meditation practice. That we are coming in, if you are practicing mindfulness of breathing, and of course there's lots of different meditation practices, and we do different guided meditations here as well, but if you are doing mindfulness of breathing, based on the Anapanasati Sutta in the Pali Canon, then we want to make sure we are following the instructions and that we are coming into samadhi before we then start to investigate. Focusing more on the energy that's moving our breath, as the instruction that we talked about yesterday that is missing from the instructions, somehow got missed in the translations, making it harder for us to meditate, making us harder for us to come into this samadhi state. But when you do this and practice for yourself, see if when you bring your attention to the energy that is moving your breath, right? So going from the physical aspect of feeling the breath moving the body and going in deeper to the energy that's moving your breath, notice how that changes your experience in your meditation, how much lighter you feel, how much more joy it brings to you, right? These are the conditions. This is how you sustain your attention effortlessly. Without it, we can still get there, but there's a lot of effort, back and forth, back and forth. Mind wanders, we bring it back. The mind wanders, we bring it back. It's when we focus just on the physical aspect of the breath, there's a lot more effort involved. Sometimes we'll get to samadhi, but we could spend 90% of our meditation trying to get there. And then in the last few minutes of it, not a lot of time for contemplation and investigation. So we want to try and, by making sure we are following the correct instructions, setting the conditions to come into samadhi more quickly so that we know what are the conditions, not just rolling the dice. I hope I get into samadhi today. Let's see, right? I hope so, right? Instead of rolling the dice, knowing, oh, this is what I have to do. This is how I set the conditions. So we spent a little bit of extra time. Well, we just spent our time in samadhi. We didn't go into vipassana in our meditation today, just to give us a little bit more of a feel of samadhi. So, and of course we can open up for any questions. I'll also just keep talking. If anyone has any questions on their practice, oh, hi, Jessica. Oh, thank you. Oh, and Nancy. I don't think I said hi to you, Nancy. So, how do you release the grasping? I am so porous to others' energies. Outside of meditation, yeah. So first of all, it is very much linked to your meditation. That was the point I was trying to make. And I think this is, first of all, everything's all connected, right? It's all connected. I think our mindfulness outside of meditation is not as strong because I don't think our meditation practices are necessarily as strong because we're missing so much, because we're missing this crucial part in our practice. So I would suggest, Jessica, first of all, making sure that you really are if you're doing mindfulness of breathing or whatever meditation practice you're doing, that making sure that you are following the instructions properly to not just calming the body, not just calming the mind. Like, this is good, we want to do that, but being careful that sometimes some of the meditations that are out there, if we just focus on that, we never get to the wisdom. And so it's going to be hard for you as you're being mindful about your, being more mindful throughout the day. It's hard to you're kind of already grasping before you realize it. So I would just ask you, check in with your meditation. Make sure that your meditation practice, at least from my perspective, and as a Buddhist teacher, from my perspective, your meditation should be leading you to greater wisdom and compassion. That's the objective, to be wiser and more compassionate, not to be a great meditator, not to be able to just bliss out and look, I can just sit here and hold, I can stay in samadhi for 3 hours, and isn't this great? Like, great, yeah. And of course it feels nice, and that probably gives you a little bit of a lift as you're going about your day. But if it's not rooted in wisdom, something will come along. Just wait, there will be something that will come along and trigger you and pull you out of it. So you want to make sure that your practice is based on wisdom and compassion. And then as you're being mindful, as you're going about your day, remember, mindfulness is being aware of our experience in a non-judgmental way, recognizing what's going on. When you're starting to feel your energy, the energy of others, and then maybe it's kind of leading to some grasping, something's happening there. Again, what I would suggest is focus on your energy. Bring your attention into your energy and feel your energy. So really coming in, again, just coming into what's making up the feelings, again, the energy, coming in and feeling it at that level so you can be more curious about the energy that you're experiencing, like, this is an energy that's feeling a little bit heavy because of the person I'm around. I can feel the heavy energy. And you can, if you're with the energy and you're just noticing the energy, really being curious. Of course, what you're doing is you're coming towards your experience. You're not turning away from it. You're coming towards it. You're being with it. You're accepting it. This is what mindfulness is, being with your experience. And again, coming into the energy, you will notice whatever we observe changes. You will notice your own energy start to shift and change and to be more resilient in the energy of others. Or if you're feeling you're awkward around someone, you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, coming in and feeling your own energy, being curious, feeling that, and by bringing your attention to it, by really being with it. This is another challenge in mindfulness of our feelings, which is, of course, something we should still be doing as well, but we have a little bit of an aversion to our feelings. This doesn't feel good. They feel a little aggressive, and the story is tied a little bit too closely to it. So we can come into the energy where the story feels much more separate from the energy. It doesn't even seem in the same neighborhood. And we can come into the energy and be with our experience, and this is what is needed, right? And it's unpleasant energy, right? It doesn't feel good, but without the story, we can be there with it. And again, by bringing our attention to it, we start to notice the energy change. And then our energy is no longer being affected by the other person's energy. We start to feel our energy balancing out again. We start to feel that lightness again. Okay, I feel all right again. So this is all very much within your domain to be able to do in your meditation and outside of your meditation. And I'll just look at your other questions, Jessica, and then I'll get back to your question, David. Is the type of meditation I do or not meditating for a long enough time? This is what I'm working on so much, compassion and non-judgment. I'm very unkind to myself. So I mean, it could be, a combination of is the practice having the right results for you? Not that we want to get results I mean, it's a little difficult with that because we're not trying to turn this into something with a goal. And yet we are meditating because we are trying to see reality, right? To see reality. Compassion, non-judgment, all comes from seeing reality. Genuine compassion and non-judgment comes from seeing reality. Being kind to ourselves comes from seeing reality. When you see how it is all arising, right? The compassion, even for someone who has been unkind to you, is there because you understand, man, they must have some really difficult conditions, right? And if I had all of their conditions, I would be exactly the same. I would be no different if I had their exact conditions, right? So our compassion comes naturally from seeing reality. We don't judge others naturally from seeing reality, but all of these practices are helping us to see reality. This is what we are trying to do. So, I mean, definitely doing compassion practices helps us to see reality, right? Opening our hearts, doing Tonglen practice. I think Tonglen is one of the best compassion practices that we can do. Doing self-compassion practices when we are being unkind to ourselves and kind of petting oh, sweetheart, that was a little embarrassing back there. Well, sweetheart, you kind of made a bit of a fool of yourself back there, right? To bring ourselves back down into the present moment. But all of these practices, they all help. Founded on a practice that is helping you to see reality. Mindfulness of breathing, where you're going through and you're going through the stages to see and contemplate reality. It's why it's one of the, I think one of the best meditations to do this. And of course, we have other practices. We have the direct path, where we go in directly to experience our true nature, which gives us that experiential reference to who we really are. But again, you can go in there if it's not based on wisdom. It's not going to last. Everything is resting on wisdom here. Everything in our path is resting. Wisdom and compassion, I should say, two sides of the same coin. Our practice should be resting on wisdom and compassion. So, Jessica, I would ask you check in with your practice. Are you finding in your practice, like ask yourself if you're doing a mantra meditation, if you're doing guided meditations, if you're doing compassion or heart-centered meditations, why are you doing those particular meditations? What is it that you are learning in those meditations? What are you seeing in those meditations? But then to also be really kind to yourself with your practice, because you might say, well, no, I'm doing these practices and I do find I'm becoming more I'm less irritated about certain things. I feel more compassion in certain situations, not in all situations, but maybe you do feel there's a sense of letting go. There's a sense of being more at ease, of being more present. Fantastic, fantastic. So just continue with what it is you're doing and don't be hard on yourself about where you are on the path, because there's so many things that are affecting where you are, what you are seeing and what you aren't seeing. This class, our dialogue, being a cause, a condition, affecting your path. But ultimately, you aren't controlling this either. You do your practices, you do check in, and you make sure that you're doing the right practices and that they are leading you to greater wisdom and compassion. And only you can decide and tell us whether you find you have been able to let go of some things, but then there's other things you haven't quite let go of. That is simply indicative of the needing to deepen your wisdom and compassion practices. So, and to be honest, where you did talk about the time that you're meditating for long enough, I mean, a general rule of thumb has been kind of twice a day, 20 minutes. It's going to be hard to have real deep insights into reality twice a day, 20 minutes. It's a great practice to get started, and I know for many of you that you're working. And for me, for a long time when I worked in the financial industry, and that was really all I could fit in. So, for those conditions that I had then, no judgment on that. I mean, it's better than not doing anything, absolutely. And you will still be letting go a little bit. But I probably would say 30 minutes to an hour is a good meditation. To really come into samadhi, and of course, and I'm going to get to your question, David, about that instruction. Really knowing how we're coming into our practice, and spending more time in samadhi, and spending more time then in insights, and really investigating the nature of reality. We do need some time for that. So, I would, on the very low side, say 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour ideal. If you can do it, please do not take that to be discouraging if that's not in your, if you don't have the conditions to be able to practice for that amount of time right now. Whatever you can do is helping. But if you do have the time and you have the inclination, then I would really strongly encourage you to increase the time. Slowly. If you're doing 20 minutes right now and you have a little more time, go to 25 minutes. Right? Do that for a couple weeks, and then if you still have the time and your 25 is okay, then go to 30 minutes. Like slowly, gradually build up to it. Okay, so from David, what is the missing piece of translation that I mentioned? How are we defining samadhi? What are the signs that it has been achieved according to the Pali? Thanks. So this is what we talked about yesterday on Sunday Sangha, that in the Anapanasati Sutta, mindfulness of breathing, in a book written by Ajahn Sucitto, who was a Theravada Buddhist monk. In his book, Breathing Like a Buddha, he thinks that there's been a translation, that there's been an instruction that is missing in the translation. And we have to be very careful of the translations because they are translations. And sometimes things do get missed. And it was based on his own experience. He's been a monk for nearly 50 years. And based on his own experience of samadhi being that state where the mind is clear, the mental formations have ceased, the hindrances are no longer around. You feel, the heart and the mind are very gladdened, as they say. It's very uplifted, very rapturous, very blissful state. If you've spent any time in samadhi, it feels you feel like just in this cocoon of warm, loving energy. It feels so beautiful. It really does, which is why it can be very tempting to just stay in that state. It just feels so good. And it's not like you're leaving that state for vipassana or for insight, but it feels really good when you are in that state. And we, of course, the translation that we use for samadhi, the Pali word, into English is concentration, which sounds very forced and very rigid, which I don't think really describes what samadhi is. The mind is no longer distracted, right? The mind is no longer off with the hindrances. The body is very calm. So the mental formations have ceased. The body is calm. The mind is very open. So this is the state of samadhi. And the instructions in the Anapanasati Sutta, mindfulness of breathing, are telling us to focus our attention on our breath, right? Know that you're being aware of the breath. If the breath is long, you're aware the breath is long. If the breath is short, you know the breath is short. To be thoroughly and sensitive to the breath in the body, right? All of the instructions are more about the physical aspect of the breath, or that's how we've taken the instructions, to be more about the physical aspect of the breath. And what Ajahn Sucitto points out in this book, breathing like a Buddha. And he goes through it in a little more detail. I don't go through in such detail there, but that in the Buddha's time, the life force, the prana, the chi, in Pali, the pana, would have been, he would have been familiar with this. When he learned to meditate, he would have been familiar with this. When he first learned from Hindu masters, when he left home, he would have been very familiar with coming into this samadhi state from his Hindu yogi teachers, coming into this blissful state of concentration, of samadhi. And so when Ajahn Suchitaka went back to really look at the texts and to juxtapose that against his experience of coming into samadhi, that it's this energetic, blissful, rapturous state where the mind is effortlessly sustained, right? Not rigid, not forced, not trying to concentrate it on something, but it's this sense of openness, this sense of bliss where the breath slows down. You're barely breathing at that stage, and yet your energy is very uplifted. So he goes through and is suggesting that the missing instruction is that after we have our attention on the physical aspect, because there is a benefit to the physical aspect of the breath, there's an initial grounding of it, a feeling of the body, coming into the body, so that kind of slowly unveiling the layers. But then when you come into the energy that's moving the breath, you naturally lift your energy, lighten your energy. The mind naturally feels more at ease, more peaceful. The hindrances naturally fall away. And so coming into the energy that's moving our breath naturally brings us to samadhi. And then in samadhi, once we're in this blissful state, in this where our mind, again, effortlessly, this is a key word that's often used in the suttas, effortlessly sustained, right? And it's like you're not forcing anything. It feels good. You feel good. But then at this stage where we come into insight and vipassana, where we contemplate and investigate the nature of reality. So the book was just published last year. If you're familiar with Theravada Buddhism, Ajahn Suchitaka is quite a senior monk in the Thai forest tradition. And when I read the book, and by the way, we all read things where we go, oh, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to talk about it like it doesn't make any sense. But when I read it, it just absolutely went off in my head as well. And then integrating it into practice, that yes, you just go into samadhi so much faster. And so, yeah, it would make sense that this was missing in the translations, that something got mistranslated. It's a relatively small number of people that are translating from Pali to English. Mostly monastics, scholars that are not doing the practices, and they don't do it on purpose because they think it might interfere with their ability to translate. And yet I think in this instance, it's like, no, it would have helped you to maybe understand what some of the words, what the Buddha was describing here. And then, of course, there's lay persons that have a very strong practice that are also translating some of the texts. But it's a relatively small number of people. It's relatively new. It's difficult. Some of the words from Pali to English, they don't really translate that well. Even the word dukkha, which is translated as suffering. And so many people hear that and it feels so heavy. It sounds like suffering. Well, I don't feel like I'm suffering. You might think, well, but maybe do you feel a sense of dissatisfaction? Just that little bit, something's not quite right? How often are you feeling that, right? That it doesn't always have to be this heavy suffering. And so, again, just the translation of words sometimes. So I do think it's really good that we go back and visit the suttas ourselves, go back and read them. And of course, I always have to read a sutta alongside a commentary, so I get an extra layer of someone else's opinion, but it helps kind of guide me in there so that I can then start to form my own opinions. And we do want to rely ultimately on our own opinions, on our own experience. I get that we do need to take some advice initially. You're taking advice from me. But don't just take this all at face value. Practice and see for yourself. See how it works for you in your experience. So it's okay, I think, for us to question sometimes if something, especially just in the Anapanasati Sutta, nowhere does it mention we should be struggling so much to get into the state of samadhi. And yet how many of us have had this experience, meditating for years, for decades, where it can be a real struggle on some days, that just ping pong back and forth, trying to settle the mind. When with this additional instruction, and just see for yourself, David, see how this works for you. With this additional instruction, do you find it settles the mind? Do you find the hindrances fall away? Do you find that you are more spacious, you're more at ease? Do you find that your energy is more uplifted? If so, great, continue, because we definitely want to get into samadhi to be able to investigate the nature of reality. Okay, so, for Angela, the name of the book is Breathing Like a Buddha. Breathing Like a Buddha. Oh, and just from Mari's here, point about, which is a good point, when a friend starts to get on your nerves recently, the energy between you changes and it may be time to part ways. Yes, absolutely. I think, Mari, you did my Setting Boundaries workshop here as well. Like, it doesn't mean that we need to be around people that have really unpleasant energy either, that are going through stuff. But with that said, always holding them in our heart. Always holding them in our heart. Right? Having genuine compassion for people that are going through their struggles, because there but go, I'll use a Christian saying, there but go I for the grace of God. If I had had their conditions, I would be doing exactly the same thing. Someone would be saying, I don't like Meredith's energy. It feels really toxic. It feels really judgmental. It feels really aggressive. And I do think it's really important for us to recognize, though, when being around someone isn't healthy for us, and yet still holding them in our heart, because there but go I for the grace of God. It could be me. If I had those conditions, it sure as heck would be. So from Char, sorry, we're going back now 18 minutes to your question here. Is there anything to be gained by in-person group meditation over meditating on your own? I've only ever meditated on my own, and I'm wondering if there's an energetic change to group meditation. There's definitely an energetic change in group meditations, of course, because everyone's settling their energy down, right? Or settling their mind, their restless energy. And so, yes, there is definitely a benefit in meditating in groups. I first started meditating in groups, and in fact, it was the only way I could do it. I couldn't meditate on my own. I mean, I probably could have, but I would give up too quickly. So meditating in the beginning for me was incredibly helpful in groups. So yes, there is a benefit to being able to meditate in groups. There is a benefit, but of course you also really want to be able to meditate on your own, to access that energy on your own as well. So I'm not suggesting you need to go out to find a group. It's nice if you can, if you have a Sangha that's local and you could go once a week and meditate as a group. I think it is a really nice experience. But it's also, I think what's more important there is knowing how to meditate just by yourself and in silence. Maybe someone I saw that question come up. I'm kind of jumping around a little. I'm going to jump to Sue's point here because I'm going to tie that in. Should meditation be in silence? I've been doing a 40-minute guided meditation as part of my morning practice, focused on releasing a fear that connects with releasing negative thoughts from past trauma. Okay, actually, now that I've read the rest of your question, I'm going to add on a little bit to that, or I'm going to come back to that. So now, of course, guided meditations are wonderful, and there's some beautiful guided meditations, and I have guided meditations. I put them out as well. I would say that guided meditations are mostly for the beginning of our practice, especially when we're just learning how to meditate. If you're doing a specific compassion practice, I do find guided meditations can be quite helpful in that case. If you're doing a meditation, Sue, it sounds like you're doing some somatic type meditations where you're connecting negative thoughts maybe into your body by releasing with the intent of releasing trauma. Yes, definitely. That's a very helpful to do that in a guided way. Definitely, definitely. But I do think if you're progressing on the path, we are on a gradual path of awakening here, at least this is the path that I'm teaching, a gradual path of awakening. We do want to get to that. There is going to be a point where the conditions are, the guided meditations are now becoming, it's like riding your bike with the training wheels on when you know how to ride the bike at this point. You would get so much more out of it if you let the training wheels off. So still, it's okay, I think. Again, compassion type meditations I find particularly helpful to do guided. You can do like somatic type work, I think is particularly helpful to do that in guided. I think in the beginning of our practice, guided meditations are incredibly helpful, just having someone there guiding us along. But there is a point to where we want to be able to do this on our own. But maybe you're also having a day where you're really tired and you're just not feeling great, and you do feel your mind maybe getting a little stirred up. Like, yeah, I think in that situation, I mean, it would be good to sit with it, to explore the energy, to feel it, but also, if it's the option between going on Facebook and doing a guided meditation, do the guided meditation. But these are, just to be clear, it's like having the training wheels on the bike, unless it's very specific meditations. And there's probably a couple of specific ones that I've also forgotten in there. If you're learning a new practice, a new meditation practice, sure, the guided meditations can be very helpful. If you're just doing even a guided Vipassana, and you're constantly just doing the same guided Vipassana over and over, you would be really well served to let that guided meditation go and do it on your own. Using your insight timer, of course, always using your insight timer. And in fact, I want to mention that, why the insight timer, why using the timer bell, using your insight timer bell. Because the bell, of course, everyone here is on insight timer. I am quite sure you're all using the bell, the meditation timer. But the reason it's so important is that if the bell goes, and of course it's a nice sounding bell, you've chosen which bell you want to sound, you know how loud the bell is, it's a nice, just pleasant little bell that happens. It's not like an alarm, you've got to jump out and turn it off. But you just hear the nice bell going off. If you're in a very deep state of samadhi and investigating in that state, contemplating the nature of reality, you can sit for longer. You can stay in that state. You're not going to be disrupted by it. So why it's always important, even if you think you're just going to sit for a 5-minute meditation, still set up the bell for yourself. Like you just think, I just have a couple minutes. Because on the other side of that, while we want to give the room on the other side, we also want to have the discipline of sitting when maybe you say, I'm going to sit for 5 minutes. And then we just kind of go, okay, well, I feel a little better, and we get up. But maybe it was only 3 minutes. And it's good to be able to sit until the bell goes off, because sometimes, even when we know how to come into samadhi more readily, depending upon the causes and conditions of what's happening in our nervous system, how we slept the night before, all of the millions and billions and trillions of things that have been happening, sometimes we can have a little bit of a difficult meditation. And just sitting there, being with it, is exactly what we need to be doing. Not saying, this isn't working, I'm going to get up and do something else right now, or I'm going to go do a guided one now, right? Sticking with what you started, even though it's unpleasant, it's not blissful, is a really, really good practice for us, because life isn't always blissful, right? We do face challenges, and it's important for us to recognize in those moments, this too is impermanent. This too will pass. But I can be with it. I can bear it in this moment. I can bear anything in this moment. And so you are still practicing. You are still practicing. So yeah, if you do find it a challenge to sit in silence, then I think add some on, along with what you're doing, because it sounds like there is some past traumas that you're working on releasing. And maybe just do some short, add on 5-10 minutes of just silence, maybe at the end of the guided meditation. So yeah, but it's a good idea to add that on. You're very welcome, Jessica. Thank you. You're going to increase to 25 and then to 30. Excellent. Excellent. Oh, Rosa, yeah. We're all very harsh to ourselves. I mean, this is, this is the ego, right? We're so brutal to ourselves. And so compassion for others, we cannot forget. In fact, I think compassion starts with ourselves, right? This is one of our practices. Self-compassion, self-compassion. Notice when you're beating yourself up. Notice it. And then, oh, sweetheart, well, you're a little rough back there. It's okay. It's okay. You make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes. Every one of us here makes mistakes. Nobody is perfect. And this practice is not about teaching us how to be perfect. It's teaching us how to be okay with not being perfect, right? Because beating ourselves up is just like we do something, we make a mistake. Maybe we're beating ourselves up because spiritual practitioners love to do this. You're not being very mindful. You're judging someone else or comparing or something. You're a little lost in your thoughts. And then you recognize what you're doing and you beat yourself up because you were judging or comparing or chasing or resisting or something, right? So it's like the ego just coming in another back door. It's kicking you over here, and then it just comes around another back door and kind of punches us in the side by beating ourselves up about it. Like we all have mindless moments. We have those moments. Of course we do. There's no need to beat ourselves up for it. And for those of you that know the Buddhist forgiveness prayer, which I'll just say very quickly because of what's so important for the 4th verse, for anyone that has harmed me, for anyone that I have harmed, either knowingly or unknowingly, through my own confusions, fears, and desires, I ask for your forgiveness. For anyone that has harmed me, either knowingly or unknowingly, through their own confusions, fears, and desires, I forgive them. For anything I am not yet ready to forgive, I forgive myself for that. And for all the little ways I harm myself, negate, doubt, belittle, judge, and criticize, I forgive myself for that too. This is one of the most powerful prayers, and I say it every day. I said it for years, like 3 times a day before every meditation. And then I kind of stopped for a couple of years because it worked. A lot of things that I couldn't forgive. I mean, that's where the 3rd verse comes in. For anything I'm not yet ready to forgive, I forgive myself for that. So that I'm still practicing forgiveness. I'm forgiving myself for not being able to forgive, but that 4th verse is so important as well. For all the little ways that I harm myself, negate, doubt, belittle, judge, and criticize, I forgive myself for that too. If you say this prayer over and over and over, the words just sink in. And you notice because you say the words, right? And you can say it before you meditate. I say 2 prayers before I meditate. That's one of them. And then the prayer of St. Francis, which I love, that beautiful prayer. I don't say it in a Christian sense, but the words are beautiful. The words are beautiful. And when you say the words over and over, you'll notice. Then you start belittling, judging, criticizing, because you've said the words so many times. You're aware of it, and you're like, oh, I forgive myself for that. Oh, sweetheart, you were being a little tough on yourself back there. You're human. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to do that, right? And so it just has a way of bringing it more to our attention. And I will just add, for those that don't know it, this prayer, what it's really basing this on is the ego. For anyone that I've harmed, either knowingly or unknowingly, through my own confusions, fears, and desire, right? Fear and desire creating confusion, right? I haven't come across yet a situation where it hasn't been acting out of fear and desire, where we then need to go back and ask for forgiveness. Not saying that there wouldn't exist situations like that, just maybe sometimes even collateral damage, something, but most of the time it's out of fear and desire. And so in the first verse, if I'm asking for forgiveness because I have harmed people, I definitely have. We all have. You can't walk on this planet without having done that. And I mean, especially we take our whole lives, 58 years on this planet, definitely, it's happened. And it's important to acknowledge that I have harmed people through my confusions, fears, and desires. And so if I ask for forgiveness in the first verse, then I'm giving forgiveness in the second verse because for the very same reasons that I harmed other people, people have harmed me. Confusions based on fears and desires. Still all those fears and desires, causes and conditions, by the way. Still all causes and conditions. But then the third verse, because sometimes even though we've harmed people, right, and it's all almost always ego-based, sometimes the harm is just too much and we're not ready to forgive. And so we can still practice forgiveness by forgiving ourselves for not being ready to forgive. So I would recommend saying the prayer. I'll put the prayer in the group. We have that group. I need to change the name on my teacher's page. I know, Char, you're in there. But I'll change it to something else, like our meditation group. I'll put the prayer in there so that you can print it out. Say it. Just say the words. They are so powerful. Prayers are just beautiful words. Beautiful words. So powerful. So powerful. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're sending the hearts there. Thank you, Lucilla. I appreciate. Okay. Okay, I think we've caught up with all the questions here. Okay, so hopefully, Richard. Oh, thanks. I love Paramahansa Yogananda. I have his picture up there. When I lived in San Diego, the Self-Realization Fellowship, there was a center 10 minutes from where I lived, and I used to go in there and meditate all the time. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful teachings. Beautiful teachings. Thank you, Richard, for sharing that. Okay, so maybe we should bring our time together here to an end. All things are impermanent. All things must come to an end. So thank you all for the great questions. Thank you so much to Angela and Jessica and Rosa and Char and David. And thank you all so much. Lucilla, Richard, thanks you guys. Sue. You guys all contributed in making this arise. All of you contributed to how this arose today, right? Every one of you that was on here, whether you said something or didn't say something or typed something in the comments or didn't type something, you contributed in that way. And that's how everything is arising. This is the whole point of this. The whole point is what we are trying to see is the nature of reality. But we are so deluded into believing our own thoughts and stories and perceptions that we don't see it. And this is what meditation is doing for us. But we want to make sure we do have our meditation practice, that we're doing that we're practicing correctly. And it's okay to make adjustments. It's okay. And if you take in some new information, okay, make an adjustment. If it makes sense, add it on. And you can always ask me questions as well. I mean, not just here on Mindful Mondays. You can always send me a message on Insight Timer. I'm happy to help. So thanks. You're welcome, Lisa. You're very welcome, Libby Lou and Nancy. So have a wonderful rest of your day. And then we will have Sunday Sangha next Sunday. Monday for those of you in Australia. Oh, thank you, Char. Thanks so much. Oh, thank you, Nancy. And Sue, Mari, Diane, thank you guys. Thank you all so much. Thank you.